On behalf of the state, do you have a final argument?
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. The defendant's deceptions, clever little half-truths, her performance, it can get over on some people. She's really convincing if you don't look too closely, if you don't ask too many questions, or make her angry. But just like the spider and the fly, where the fly is drawn into the spider's webs, Joe Hartsfield, unfortunately, was drawn to the defendant, and he got caught in her webs. Defense counsel made a lot of promises to you in open that were not fulfilled. There is no evidence, other than the defendant's own words, that she was actually under the influence of narcotics. In fact, the evidence is to the opposite. There's actually no evidence that his mismanagement of diabetes led to this heart issue that killed him. The statement that Joe's family had no evidence that she did this. Your family member is desperately trying to leave a woman who you know killed her fiance, who you know, because of her own words, that she's being investigated for a murder for hire, that you know, you have watched the violent swings in her communicating with you. And you know that your son and your brother is scared for his life. You know his worst fear, and you know he's hospitalized for that fear coming to life, and you know that the doctors who are treating him are suspicious of the same person you are, but they had no evidence. Defense counsel told you that the evidence was going to show that Joseph Hartsfield suffered a stroke, and in fact you heard definitive testimony that that's not what happened to him. Defense counsel told you that Detective Rocks made the decision to bring her to court without any investigation, and you saw the exact opposite. You heard from Detective Rocks that she poured through the voluminous records in this case. You saw how precise she was on the stand. You knew some of the people that she spoke with in this investigation. And to call this no investigation is an incredible mischaracterization. To say that we don't know the who, the where, the when, it's just a gross mischaracterization of what you saw play out during this trial. If the defendant wanted to kill her husband, that she held a lot of contempt for, how would she do it? What is the way that provides the best defense for her? The most obvious one. And had it happened somewhere else, had it happened with a different family, she probably would have gotten away with it. But Joe's family was paying attention. The medical staff was paying attention. Detective Rocks was paying attention. Sarah miscalculated who she could do this to and where she could do it. Think back to what defense counsel has tried to draw out of witnesses when things don't matter. Think back to the second witness Joe's sister, Jeannie Hartsfield, think back to his mom. What was he fighting with them about? What type of diabetes Joe had when he knew the medical records were very clear? What was the point of that? That Joe should have been low whenever every documented thing says that he ran high? The defendant thought she was the smartest person in any room and that no one could catch her and that she was going to get away with it because that's what she's always done. When defense asked the doctors, when I asked the doctors how many times they have had an insulin overdose and then how many times they'd seen someone die of it, what was their answer? This is not something that people in this country, with the medical care that we have, that have lived with this condition for this long, die from. It is a statistical problem with how she killed him. It's a practical impossibility based on how he treated his own diabetes and how he died. Blood sugars are easy to fix. You heard this repeatedly. This is something that was throwing them off in the hospital because this is not how a body should react. If you accidentally administer too much insulin to yourself when there's not the intent to kill you, when there's not the waiting and watching you die of it, this is a treatable thing. But that's not what got to happen. That's not what happened for Joe. Because it wasn't an accident. It was the defendant making sure he got enough insulin in his body that he couldn't recover. Defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that Joe had uncontrolled diabetes, when in reality, that uncontrol was Joe being high. And you heard his fear, his terror of being low. That was intentional on his part. He didn't want to risk being too low. But defense counsel wants you to focus on the uncontrolled part because that much better fits their narrative of really Joe just did this to himself. But you saw the Dexcom readings. You read the medical examiner's determination. You heard the testimony from the doctors. This was something that happened to him, not because of him. And what should you make of the people that came and testified about their experiences with the defendant? Is every person in Sarah Hartsfield's life just trying to conspire against her? Or does it show statistical impossibility? I told you from the beginning, and now we're here, you've seen it, she's a performer. Another well-timed tear, another look over her shoulder to the camera, another carrying of her prop that she forgets sometimes and doesn't seem to touch unless she knows someone's watching. It's showmanship for her. Another fly caught in her web. It is really, really rare to encounter someone of this nature. And for the good of the community, for the good of the world, you 12 have to form an opinion. You have to do something. For far too long, too many people have known and have done nothing. You know what she did. There are people who didn't have faith in her being held accountable because she's really slippery. She's really effective at making a very attractive web. And she's good at tangling people so tightly into this web. But you are ready, and you have the opportunity and the duty to right this wrong. You can fix what other people have failed to do. You can stand up and you can say, enough, enough. These are the elements. These are the only elements that the state has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And we went over these in voir dire. I don't have to prove, as defense counsel continually asks, I don't have to prove how she did it. I would love to know. I would love to know how she did it, but that's not one of my elements. Did she intentionally or knowingly cause the death of Joseph Hartsfield? I don't have to prove that she's not a likable person. I don't have to prove that he is a likable person. I don't have to prove why she did it. Those are my elements that the judge just read to you in your charge. And if you find that I've met these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, and you vote anything other than not guilty, you are holding me to a higher burden, and you are violating the oath that you took. You have heard all of the admissible evidence at this point. What I say, what defense counsel says, not evidence. It's obvious that there have been things that the court has ruled are improper for you to hear. The only thing that you can consider is the evidence that came from that stand and the evidence that's been admitted in trial. And that alone is enough to prove to you that this defendant committed this act with that intent. And you know where she did it? She did it right here in our home. She did it in Chambers County. For a moment, I just want to go over the jury charge with you. The most important part of the law is on the first page. A person commits the offense of murder if she intentionally or knowingly causes the death of an individual. Those are my elements. And you heard about the law regarding extraneous offenses. And you can consider that if I've met that burden as to those offenses beyond a reasonable doubt. Some of you may think, yep, that one's proven. Some of you may think, I'm not sure on that one. That's an individual choice. What must be unanimous is your verdict of guilty. That page, I would submit to you, is the most important. And that's page 8 of the jury charge. I can't tell you if she put the needle in him herself, or if she grabs his hand and uses his own hand while he's drugged by her drugs when he's unconscious, and she uses his own hand to do it. I can't tell you that, and there's a reason I can't tell you that. Because murderers hide how they murder people generally. But you get to use your reason and your logic and your common sense. And you also get to know that that's not one of my elements that defense counsel wants to hold me to. Defense counsel would have you believe that we're here today because a rogue detective performed a shoddy investigation and the state, the government, has railroaded an innocent woman. But we're here today because a woman, the defendant, murdered her husband in cold blood. That's why you have been summoned and you have sat through testimony and you have paid attention, and now is your call. And I think most of you probably know where you are. I've watched you pay attention. You can look at the evidence, of course, but when you go to the back, I would recommend that you pick a foreperson and you take a quick poll to see where you are. Some of you are probably already there. Some of you may want to look at certain things. You can request some of the evidence, you can request all the evidence, or after your poll, you can say, actually, we're good. I'm going to sit down for a moment, and defense counsel is going to be able to talk to you. And I want you to pay attention to what he says. And I want you, again, like I said in open, lean in and pay attention to what he's asking you to focus on. He is a skilled attorney. He is really, really good at his job. So don't fall into that web. Don't fall into that trap. When he's asking you to look at the whole and not the whole picture, lean in and see what he is arguing to you. What he tries to convince you is an element when it's not. Listen to how he tries to make the pieces fit that don't belong. And remember what your job is. Thank you.